ich weiß, dass er sehr verstimmt war darüber, dass das Thema dieses Films, nämlich der Kindermord, nicht mehr Thema dieser Version war, sondern das Thema der neuen Version, der veränderten, der etwas gekürzten Version, war die Entdeckung dieses Mörders und die Jagd auf den Mörder durch die Bettler. Eine großartige Komposition und eine großartige Darstellung, aber eben eine verkürzte. Aber mehr weiß ich darüber nicht. Und ich weiß auch nicht, wer sie gemacht hat, wer diese verkürzte Version zu verantworten hatte. Es ist durchaus denkbar, dass in der deutschen Öffentlichkeit damals, oder in der Öffentlichkeit nicht, aber dass man vermutet oder befürchtet hat, dass ein Film über einen Kindermord die Leute abstößt. Und dass man deswegen versucht hat, dieses Thema etwas zu reduzieren und den Film zu konzentrieren auf die dann Hauptgeschichte, nämlich die Jagd nach dem Mörder durch die Bettler.
Almost 30 years had passed since the first screening of M. The war had left deep scars on the country, but also on the film. Germany had changed. The younger generation embraced American ideals, too young to remember their own film heritage. And many of the now older generation that experienced silent film and the early talkies had been killed in the war. Others had fled the country, never to return. Germany's film industry literally bled out, mortally wounded by its own hand. The shadow of the Nazi era was still visible in every household. But people dealt with it by not talking about it, and thus nobody talked about the riches of the golden days either. This had a disastrous effect on the films produced by greats such as Murnau, Pabst and Lang. Almost forgotten by the new Germany, a few producers and publishers like Hans Eckelkamp took up a financial gamble and unearthed the old treasure in the early 1960s, only to find it in poor condition. What audiences saw of M in 1960 at its re-release premiere was a film with more than 10 minutes of footage missing and dramatic alterations in sound and narrative. Portions that were silent in the original featured dubbed sound now. Dialogue was added, and even the whistling of the Peer Gynt theme was redone, and poorly at that. The most dramatic changes were made in the beginning and at the end of the picture. The main titles now opened with a listing of actors and production team featuring an orchestration of Edvard Grieg's music as underlay. And the end sequence was altered as well. A monologue was added, and the ending literally cut off after the hand taps Peter Lorre's shoulder and the words, "In the name of the law."
Polizei! Hände hoch!
Later editions, released on video in the 1980s, featured this following re-recorded narration, basically reinstating the message that Lang intended, albeit that it was produced very clumsily.
Im Namen des Gesetzes.
Und wir müssen auf unsere Kinder viel, viel mehr Acht geben.
I don't know why these changes were made. I mean, apparently whoever made this release version in the 1960s thought that he had a better idea of what the film could be than Lang had, and so he made changes. He added music, they added voices, they probably, I think in some scenes they even added effects, because the film is largely silent except for spoken dialogue here and there. And that is one of what I think one of the outstanding features of the film, and that of course was very disturbing to someone in the 1950s or in the 1960s. You would expect the film to be all talking and not half silent. I cannot comment on who made these things or exactly, or why they were exactly made, or what was the rationale behind it. I can just speculate that the film was at that time seen as something that could not be marketed in the original form. And as in so many other cases, it was just altered.
The changes in the geometric dimensions of the film were often painful to watch. In almost every scene, the heads of the actors were either grazed, as in the following sequence, that of Peter Lorre, or totally cut off, as in this case of Gustav Grinkens. Evidently, the distributors of the film noticed its by now peculiar aspect ratio of 1:19:1, which was common for the early talkies between 1928 and 1931. It made the film almost square, as the sound, invisible for the audience, was located to the left of the picture frame. But in the post-war era, projectors had changed and were incapable of handling the format. And so, to avoid exposure of the variable density sound code on screen, the picture was blown up, which resulted in the decapitation of some actors.
Ums Wort! Das Wort hat der Herr Verteidiger!
Mein sehr geschätzter Vorredner, der, wenn ich mich nicht irre, wegen Totschlags in 3 Fällen von der Kriminalpolizei...
Das gehört nicht hierher.
Lang was furious at all the changes that were made, but without any contracts that established copyright ownership, he was powerless. Feeling already cheated by producer Seymour Nebenthal, from whom he received no royalties out of the project, Lang was now dealt yet another setback with the mutilation of his self-acclaimed most precious picture. It was not the only picture of his that received that kind of blow. The silent classics were also affected, which hurt the director deeply, as producer Hans Beckert recalls.
Der wusste auch, er musste sich abfinden damit, dass es für die damaligen Jahre die bestmögliche Version war. Die großen Leistungen der Restauratoren später waren noch kaum zu erahnen, geschweige denn vorwegzunehmen und auch erst recht nicht abzuwarten. Dann lägen die Filme vielleicht heute noch in den Archiven und wären nicht auf dem Markt gewesen.
In retrospect, Eckelkamp and his fellow publishers who re-released these pictures in the early 60s, albeit in poor quality and incomplete, revived the long-dormant public interest in the heritage, and gradually a piece of film history that was almost forgotten was put back together again.
When the film was re-released in the 1960s, there was also a book published by Enno Patalas and Georg Gandert, which was basically a script of the film, written after the existing prints. And they showed that to Lang, when he came to Germany in those years, and he reminded them already of scenes that were missing and things that were completely against his intentions as the film was now edited. And so they inserted those scenes in the book. They just made sure that everybody would know that something was missing from that release. And since Enno Patalas had been involved with this book, he often, when he became director of the Munich Film Museum, he of course tried to find ways to complete the print that they had in Munich. And he found material in various other archives that he then duped and put into his print. So there was a work print that was pretty much complete, and that was of course what we also followed as an editing model. And that was, I think that was put together perhaps in the late 70s or in the early 80s sometime around. So something was always there that would give you an idea of what the original cut would have been like. But of course the image quality and especially the sound quality was very much below standard, because it was all based not on the originals, because they seemed to be inaccessible. Nobody knew where they were.
With the work print of Enno Patalas as a guideline, the European Union funded in 1995 the restoration of M, which was conducted by Donat Kösch. But while the film was brought back almost to its original length, both the technical quality and the arbitrary use of sound caused the result to be less than satisfactory. Sound effects that did not belong were still audible in various scenes. Many film reels that were used for this reconstruction, which subsequently appeared on various VHS, Laserdisc and DVD releases, had a second frame line on top of the frame printed in. Also, the aspect ratio is much closer to 1:33:1 than the original 1:19:1.
Fühlbarer Zug von Wahnsinn.
So 1995 restoration, unfortunately, was not based on the camera negative and the nitrate elements that we based our restoration on. For some reason, they based themselves on existing dupe material, which was inferior in quality, of course, as far as image quality goes, and had a general problem that when the dupe was made, the original aspect ratio, which is, in American terms, it would say movie tone, it's 1:19:1. So the original silent frame has just been cropped on the left, and otherwise the height stays the same. It's a more or less square image. That had not been respected when these dupes were made, so you had an extra frame line on top of the image, which is very disturbing and crops off a sufficient amount to cut people's heads off in long shots and to cut their foreheads off in close-ups. And that, of course, was unacceptable. So we decided we didn't want that, and that was one of the main reasons, of course, also to go through another restoration, because whenever I showed the existing restorations, they all have that problem. And so I could convince the people in Amsterdam and Berlin easily by just showing that, what existed, which otherwise is complete. I mean, all the scenes are there, but the image quality is just not what you want.
Berlin, the Potsdamer Platz, once the busiest place in Europe of the late 1920s. Today, it's the home of the Berlin Film Museum, a contributor to the Berlin Film Festival, renowned for its retrospective presentations that stir rising interest every year. It is here that restorations of the great classics are shown, and where the reconstruction and restoration of Fritz Lang's milestone Metropolis was put on track, opening the doors to the classic in its original form for the first time for 70 years. And it was here that the hunt for the best available film elements of M began, in an effort to finally get a correct restoration underway. The man who supervised both projects is Martin Körber.
The project began in the summer of 2000. I was already preparing for the Berlin Film Festival of 2001. We had planned a retrospective of all the works of Fritz Lang. And I was going through sound films, nitrate prints in the Netherlands Film Museum and found an interesting element. I found a positive print of the Dutch release of 1931, which had some shots I hadn't never seen before. And I also knew that the original camera negative was incomplete, but however existing in Berlin, and I thought it would be nice if we would bring those things together and come up with a new restoration for the Berlin Festival. The Bundesarchiv then decided that it would cooperate in this project, and also did the Cinémathèque Suisse in Lausanne, where other elements were found that had scenes that were not in the original negative anymore. I mean, the elements were, of course, not in great shape, because there were projection prints which had been shown for like 70 years or so. And they had some wear and tear, and frames were missing, and scratches, and whatever you would expect from such an old material. The original negative, of course, was also not in great shape, because it had a lot of perforation damage, it had a lot of scratches. Some of them you will even see on the DVD, I suppose. Some of the reels had already deteriorated and had been replaced by reprints because of probably nitrate problems, so it was just, the stuff had melted away and had been replaced partly.
Nummer 24, Beckert. Städtischer Kurier wird nicht gehalten. Tisch, Mahagoni poliert mit Plüschdecke. Kein Rotstift.
The new restoration, here on the right, now includes all the surviving scenes and virtually completes the picture on the basis of the best film elements available. Corrected were also, for the first time since World War II, the aspect ratio and the presentation of the sound elements. No sound effects that were added later on are present in this restoration. Gone also are the printed-in frame lines that were so detrimental in the reconstruction of 1995. here on the left.
Was war da doch gleich? Aristen? Ich möchte die Akten Mordsache Marga Perl haben.
March 2003. The hunt for M continues. This time to make the best transfer from a fine-grain archival master print that was minted directly of the restoration negative assembled by Martin Körber. This archival master was used for the first time for transfer. Although the film restoration itself was finished early in 2001, several problems that mainly had to do with picture instabilities caused by wear and aging of the film materials warranted additional corrections which took until 2002 to complete. This long delay affected the schedule of the German DVD release and a TV broadcast, both of which had to rely in the meantime on a transfer from the unfinished film restoration materials. These still show inherent instabilities in the picture frames due to perforation damages that cause the picture to flutter. On the final archival master used for this release, here on the right, these problems have been corrected. During transfer and in the digital realm, the image quality can be further enhanced. But just as easily, if done by an inexperienced hand, things can go wrong. In the transfer from film to digital video in 2002, for instance, the automatic process of digital video noise reduction was used. It is supposed to eliminate fine dust particles and scratches, which it does, but it also reduces and compresses detail and resolution, and creates artifacts. The image then looks dull. The 2002 edition that was released in Germany on DVD and broadcast on television also had problems with the clean-up in the digital realm. Several film segments where damaged frames were supposed to be cleaned and restored were played out into the computer, and the adjustments were made. But some of the heavily damaged frames in the 2002 transfer were simply cut. That solution proved to be short-sighted. During play-out to the master tape, the video segments, now a few frames short, had to be stretched in order to match the duration of the film. That led to this effect. Frame overlaps are visible even during regular screening.
Das Resultat, bitte! Das Resultat!
They do not exist on the new transfer of this issue, as not a single frame was cut, and all frames were cleaned and restored by hand.
Und wenn Sie den Dienst antreten, sind Sie beinahe noch müder, als wenn Sie abgelöst werden.
The focus of the transfer for this new Ultimate Edition of M particularly was on accuracy and maximum gain in grayscale, detail in texture and resolution. During this transfer on a high-definition Spirit Data Cine, employing a DaVinci 2K Plus color corrector, some 630 corrections were made to balance out the various inconsistencies in scenes of the film caused by the varying quality of the restoration materials. The level of grayscale is significantly better than on any other release before, presenting the film in its true form for the first time. M, which depends so much on the representation of the photography, was framed at precisely 1:19:1, and in it the entire frame was exposed through the use of window boxing, which presents the frame in a size that makes the whole range visible even on regular TV screens. Due to a factory-installed overscan, TV sets do not show the entire picture, cutting off picture information on all sides. The result of these efforts was striking. The following frame illustrates best the enormous changes in quality as you see the before and after effect. The transfer, with all preparations, took some 6 days. After that, the digital cleanup and restoration of some 16,500 frames was done, all by hand. As today's audiences begin to discover the treasures of a long neglected and almost forgotten past, films like M, now restored to their original glory, inspired new generations, and sometimes the theme of these films is as actual today as it was back when these films were made. One disturbing constant that remained since the making of M more than 70 years ago is the occurrence of child murders. Fritz Lang, accused of cashing in on the curtain frenzy back when the picture premiered in 1931, intended this film to be a wake-up call to mothers and fathers, to society to take a look at the issue, draw conclusions, and perhaps learn. M certainly is not forgotten. It lived on as an influence, inspired radio plays, a remake, countless pictures, and even a comic strip series that copied style and subject matter. Not bad for a film with only one letter of the alphabet that almost didn't survive. But what of the theme of the picture? Did Lang have an impact? During the preparation of this documentary, yet another series of child murders rocked Germany. The names this time are not Gertrud Albermann or Elsie Beckmann. They were Sonja and Tom, 9 and 11-year-old siblings. Again, the issues of longer sentences, swifter justice, even the death penalty were discussed. Again, the media focused on the back and forth over what to do with this constant in our lives. 3 weeks later, the perpetrators were caught. Both showed no remorse. The children were mere sex toys to them.
In absoluten Zahlen gesprochen hat die Tötungsdelinquenz im vergangenen Jahrhundert einen eher wellenförmigen Charakter gehabt. Sowohl vor dem Zweiten Weltkrieg als auch danach hat es immer wieder Zeiträume gegeben, in denen es mehr Tötungsdelikte gab als in der Zeit davor oder danach. Die Gründe hierfür sind auch bis heute wissenschaftlich nicht sicher belegt. Auch heute noch wird die Bevölkerung durch Tötungsdelikte an Kindern oder Serienmorden stark beeinträchtigt, verängstigt. Es macht sich hier und dort Massenhysterie breit. Solche Delikte passieren heute und rufen immer wieder Gefühle wie Rache, das Bedürfnis nach Vergeltung wach. Es wird intensiv die Todesstrafe diskutiert. Gleichwohl muss man feststellen, dass sich lediglich die Technik geändert hat, mit der diese Täter überführt werden können. Das Profil, das soziale Muster, die Motive der Täter hingegen sind weitestgehend gleich geblieben.
As in this unique Hall of Mirrors in the Berlin Film Museum, history reflects both the film and the subject matter of M from different angles, as various opinions and beliefs are the reflector of society. Just as the occurrence of child murders, the debate how to deal with them and the murderers themselves remains a constant. This makes M as realistic and factual today as it did back in 1930, when Fritz Lang and Thea von Harbou changed the storyline of their next picture when they heard of the murders of 10 people, 5 of them little children, such as Gertrud Albermann and Rosa Ohlinger, all victims of Peter Curtin, the vampire of Düsseldorf, the man that was M.